In a forgotten corner of the city, where cracked sidewalks met overgrown lots and silence clung to the air like dust, a stray dog roamed the streets alone. His fur was patchy and dull, clinging in matted clumps to his frail frame. His ribs pushed against his skin like broken piano keys, and an old scar slashed across his snout, a silent testament to the life he'd survived. No collar, no tag, no name. People call him a nuisance. Kids threw stones. Shopkeepers chased him off with brooms. Still, he came back. Every day. But this morning, something shifted in him. He stopped wandering. Something had caught his attention. Just off the road, in a shallow ditch where garbage collected and weeds grew wild, sat an old suitcase. Worn leather, rusted zippers. Nothing remarkable to the eye. But to the dog, everything about it screamed wrong. His ears twitched. His muscles tensed. Then, without hesitation, he began to bark. Not a hungry bark. Not playful or territorial. This was a sound soaked in desperation. A deep, guttural cry, echoing down the empty street. His body trembled, eyes fixed on that suitcase like it held the soul of something he couldn't reach. He circled it, paws digging into the dirt, barking again and again, raw, frantic, as if trying to wake the world. Someone, anyone, needed to listen. The stray's barking echoed through the neighborhood like a siren no one wanted to hear. Morning turned to afternoon, and still he remained by the suitcase, his voice hoarse, his throat raw. He barked, whined, growled low in his chest, then let out long, heartbreaking howls that made the air feel colder. But the world moved on around him. Pedestrians passed by, some glancing, most ignoring. "Damn mutt," one man muttered, stepping over a puddle. A group of teenagers laughed and threw a stick at him. Others shook their heads and picked up their pace, avoiding eye contact like he was diseased. No one saw the fear in his eyes. No one cared to look closer. A few tried to chase him off. One woman even threatened to call animal control. But the stray wouldn't move. He stood his ground, barking even louder, more desperate now, as if time was running out. He scratched at the suitcase, pawed at the earth, circled it protectively. Something inside was calling to him, something too terrible to walk away from. Then, as the sun began to sink and shadows lengthened, an elderly man walked by with his golden retriever. He stopped. His dog did too. Together, they looked at the stray, and something about him felt wrong. Not aggressive, not crazy, just broken. The man studied the wild glint in the stray's eyes. It wasn't madness. It was grief. He pulled out his phone and whispered, "This dog knows something. Someone needs to come. Now." About an hour after the call, a weathered white van pulled up to the edge of the road. The logo on the side read, Hope Tales Rescue Center. From the passenger side stepped two women, one young and bright-eyed, the other older, her face lined with years of witnessing both cruelty and compassion. They spotted the stray immediately. He hadn't moved an inch. He stood like a soldier beside the battered suitcase, his body taut, fur bristling, and eyes full of fire and fear. As the women approached, he growled a low, trembling sound. His legs shook, not from rage, but from terror. The older rescuer raised her hand slowly and spoke in a soft, calming voice. "Easy, boy, we're here to help." She tossed a small piece of chicken toward him. He didn't touch it. His eyes never left the suitcase. The younger woman stepped closer, kneeling gently a few feet away. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "We see you. We hear you." She placed another treat near his paw. Slowly, cautiously, the stray stepped back, still watching, still ready to pounce if they did anything wrong. With great care, the older rescuer reached for the suitcase. The zipper was stiff, rusted from time and rain. It groaned as she pulled it open, inch by inch. The moment the lid fell back, both women gasped and covered their mouths. Inside that suitcase, under stained blankets, lay a truth too cruel for words. As the zipper slid open and the suitcase was peeled back, a foul stench hit the rescuers like a wave. Rot blood, dampness, and despair. Inside lay a heap of filthy blankets, stiff with dried fluids and clinging to something beneath. The older rescuer, her hands trembling, pulled the top layer aside and froze. There curled against the corner of the suitcase, was the lifeless body of a tiny puppy. Its fur was matted with blood, its limbs limp, and its eyes forever shut. It had died in silence, surrounded by darkness, never given a chance to cry out. The air thickened with grief as both women stared, their hearts breaking in their chests. But then something moved, a small, ragged breath, a twitch. One of the blankets shifted slightly, and beneath it, they found a second puppy, barely alive. Its tiny chest rose and fell in shallow, struggling motions. The little body was covered in bruises, with ribs poking out sharply through its skin. Fleas crawled across its ears. It was a miracle it had survived. The younger rescuer scooped the fragile pup into her arms, cradling it like glass. "She's alive," she whispered, voice cracking with disbelief. Beside them, the stray had fallen silent. He slowly approached the open suitcase, laid down beside it, and gently nudged the edge with his nose. He whimpered low, his eyes full of sorrow, not just for the one who lived, but for the one who didn't. He had known all along. He had stood guard over a grave and a flicker of life. At the veterinary clinic, the tiny surviving puppy was rushed into emergency care. She was dangerously dehydrated, her breathing shallow, her heartbeat barely detectable. As vets worked tirelessly to stabilize her, investigators and rescue workers tried to understand what had happened. The suitcase, the location, the timing, it all pointed to something deeply cruel. But the answer came in the eyes of the stray dog, who refused to leave the clinic door. He paced restlessly outside the building, ears twitching at every sound, tail low and still. And then it started to make sense. He wasn't just a random stray. He wasn't barking out of madness. He was mourning, and he had followed that suitcase not out of curiosity, but out of love. The rescuers theorized that someone, likely trying to hide a shameful act, had stuffed the two puppies inside that old suitcase and thrown them away like trash. Maybe they were unwanted or sick or simply born to the wrong dog, but the stray had seen it happen. Maybe he'd chased a vehicle that dumped them. Maybe he'd arrived too late. But once he found them, he never left. He guarded that suitcase like it held his own soul. He barked for hours, drawing attention to a horror no one wanted to believe. In doing so, he had given the surviving puppy a second chance. A fragile life was saved not by medicine, not by machines, but by a dog with a broken heart who refused to give up. He was more than a stray. He was her protector, her father, her guardian. By the next morning, the story had already begun to spread. A rescue worker had posted a photo online. Guardian curled detectively around a tiny, fragile puppy swaddled in a blanket. The caption read, "He barked for hours until someone listened. He saved her life." Within hours, the post went viral. News outlets picked up the story. Headlines blazed across the internet. "Stray dog guards suitcase for hours. What was inside shattered hearts." People from around the world were outraged and heartbroken. They sent messages to the rescue center, asking how they could help. Donations poured in: blankets, food, medical supplies, and money to support the recovery of both dogs. The little survivor was named Hope, a name chosen by the community. The stray, once nameless and forgotten, was now known as Guardian, and he earned that name with every breath. Despite everything he had endured, Guardian never left Hope's side. He watched her like a sentinel, sleeping only when she did. At night, he would curl his body around hers, sharing his warmth. He licked her gently, cleaned her ears, and whimpered as she cried in her sleep. If someone entered the room, his eyes tracked them, alert and cautious. To the world, they were a miracle, but to each other, they were family. She had survived, because he had stayed, because he had believed. As the story gained global attention, pressure mounted on the local authorities to act. Animal rights activists demanded justice, and the public outcry was deafening. Within days, the investigation led to a quiet house on the outskirts of town, a makeshift backyard breeding operation hidden behind rotting fences and locked sheds. There, authorities discovered disturbing conditions: filthy cages, malnourished dog, and piles of forgotten collars. The man responsible, cold, unapologetic, had discarded the puppies because they were deemed unprofitable, too weak, too sickly, or simply the wrong color. He had stuffed them into that suitcase and tossed them like garbage into a ditch, assuming no one would ever know. But Guardian knew, and Guardian didn't forget. The man was arrested and charged with multiple counts of animal cruelty. His breeding license was permanently revoked, and the remaining dogs were rescued and sent to shelters for proper care. The community, once silent, had found its voice, and justice was finally served. Back at the rescue center, Guardian and Hope's days began to shift from survival to healing. Hope, once a frail heartbeat away from death, now wobbled around the clinic with growing strength. Her ribs filled out, her eyes sparkled, and through it all, Guardian was never far behind. He watched her every step, lay beside her during treatments, and gently nudged her forward when she was afraid. He had saved her life once. Now, he was helping her reclaim it. Months passed, and the scars that once marked Guardian and Hope's bodies began to fade. More importantly, the ones on their hearts began to heal. A kind couple who had followed their journey from the very first viral post came forward with a simple request. They wanted to give both dogs a forever home. Together, the rescue center agreed with tears in their eyes. Guardian and Hope moved into a peaceful house surrounded by trees and laughter. There was a wide backyard, soft grass beneath their paws, and toys scattered across the lawn. Hope thrived, chasing butterflies, dozing in sunny spots, and curling up in bed with her new human siblings. She had the life every puppy deserved. And Guardian? He stayed close, always watching, always protecting. But some nights, when the world was quiet and safe, he would sit by the fence and stare out toward the road. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He just remembered the little one he couldn't save, the sibling buried in silence, ending the heartbreaking memory. In the corner of the garden, under a tree that bloomed each spring, the family placed a small stone. Carved into it were gentle words. For the little one who didn't make it, you were loved even in silence. Every morning, Guardian visited that spot. He'd sit still, tail resting the grass, eyes distant but soft. He didn't need to bark anymore. The world had heard him, and now it remembered too.